Hello everyone, and today we're going to have a lesson on calculating percent error. While going through on these slides, make sure you're recording those important pieces of information, especially those that I highlight out to you, so that way you can refer back to them later when you're working on this on your own. First off, what is percent error? Percent error is a calculation that tells us how close we are to the correct answer. The bigger our percent error, it means the more inaccurate we were. Or another way to think about it is if we have a really small percent error, that means we were really close to the correct answer. Okay, in general, error is a negative thing, which means you want it to be small. So what are the steps for finding percent error? We can really break down finding percent error into 3 steps. Step 1 is just finding your error. Okay, we just need to find your error. Now, this isn't the same as percent error, and so we'll talk about that in just a second, but it's really important to make sure we find that error first, just knowing how wrong we were before we can figure out what that is in a percentage. Number 2, we need to convert the error into a decimal. And we need to do that so then we can get to step 3, which allows us to convert to a percentage. So we need to go from a decimal into a percentage. We can't go to that percentage until we've converted it into a decimal, and that's why step 2 is there. It's that kind of middle piece allowing us to eventually get it to a percentage. So let's look at that first step, just finding the error. For finding the error, here's my problem. I counted 54 marbles in a jar. But the correct answer was supposed to be 60 marbles. So I had some form of error. So how do I find it? What is my error? You find the error by figuring out how far you were away from the correct answer. So if we're looking at this, I had counted 54 marbles. There should have been 60. So I'm going to say, all right, well, there were 60. I counted 54. So I'm going to subtract 54 from that, giving me 6 marbles as my error. All right, I was off by 6 marbles. Another way to think about it is just how far away was I? In this case, I was off by 6. Now, if you happen to do, now this is something I'll talk about a little bit again later, but since I have it here, you could do 54 minus 60, and you would still end up getting close to their answer, but you get a negative 6 marbles. Now, we can't have negative marbles for what we're doing. So what that means is if you happen to do it this way, all you're going to do is erase the negative and say, you know what, we have 6 marbles as our error. So we're going to ignore negative numbers. We call that absolute value. Easiest way probably for you to go about it is take the biggest number and subtract the smallest number when finding the error. Next, we need to convert that error into a decimal. So I found my error to be 6 marbles. I want to know my percent error. First, I need to convert my answer into a decimal. So what is my decimal? Well, in order to do that, what I need to do, now this equation I would write down in your notes, that way you have it to refer back to later. I need to take my error and I need to divide it by what the correct answer was. Okay, so what that means for our question is we had said that I had 6 marbles. So I'm going to take 6 and I'm going to divide that by the correct answer. And if you remember from earlier, the correct answer was 60 marbles. Right, because remember that was what was actually in the jar. So I'm going to divide it by 60. And now if I do that, I should find my answer to be 0.1. That's my error as a decimal. And right now we're going to use this to work on our next step, which is converting to a percentage. We need to take our decimal and convert it to a percentage. So my decimal error is 0.1. What is this in a percentage? To do this, to find the percentage, what we need to do is we need to take our decimal of 0.1 and we need to, I'm going to make the decimal bigger, multiply it by 100. And if we do that, we should end up getting the answer of 10, and then we're going to put on a percentage. That last step just converts it into a percentage. It allows us to kind of understand what the decimal is. Because sometimes if we look at a decimal like 0.1, it can be hard to tell exactly what that means. But if we hear 10%, that does help a little bit understanding, is that a big error? Is that a small error? What does that ultimately mean? In this scenario, I had a percent error of 10%, which means I was 10% wrong. Another way to think about it would be is I was 90% right. Now that error is okay. It really depends on what we're trying to figure out. Sometimes a 10% error is really good. Other times, a 10% error is actually really, really bad. You can think of this if you were developing a product. If you're trying to sell products to people and 1 in 10 was going to be defective, that's really bad, because now you're going to have a whole bunch of people having products that don't work well, and they're not going to want to buy it. So percent error can be a really important thing to be really, really small. You can think also in like the medical field, where we want that percent error to be almost zero, because you don't want something to go wrong there when it can impact people's lives. And there's other things like counting marbles, where 10% may not be that big of a deal. If I'm off by 6 marbles in this scenario, I still get the good idea of how many marbles there are. And now here are a couple more tips. First, we will never have a negative percent error. We mentioned this earlier. Always subtract biggest from smallest. That's the easiest way to make sure that you got it right. Your final step will always be multiplying by 100 when finding the percent error. So you're always going to multiply by 100 in order to convert to that percentage. That last step will always be the same. The bigger the percent, the lower our accuracy. So we've talked about accuracy. If we have a really high percent error, 80% error, that means we were very inaccurate and we almost never got the correct answer. So let's do a couple more practice problems. Here's your first one. I measured the length of a table to be 60 centimeters. The actual measurement of the table is 62 centimeters. What is my percent error? So the first thing that you're going to have to do in this question is find your error. So go ahead and find your error. Awesome. So we have our error, and what we should have found is we should have taken 62 and we should have subtracted 60 from it to give us our error of 2 centimeters. That's how far off I was. I mismeasured by 2 centimeters. So that was my first step. Now we need to move on to step number 2. So my second step is to convert it into a decimal. So go ahead and convert 2 centimeters into a decimal now. If you get stuck, refer back to that equation you should have written down for step number 2 earlier. Okay, so we should have found our decimal error so we should have found 2 divided by our correct answer of 62, and we should have found our correct answer to be 0.32. That was our decimal answer. Next, we need to find our percent error. So that's our third step. To find our percent error, we're going to now take our error from before, 0.32, and we're going to multiply by 100, which should give us a percent error of 3.2%. And if you're paying attention, I just noticed an error that I made, and you may be noticing it too. I made a mistake when I wrote out my error. I have it right here for my calculations, but I don't have it right for your screen. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. It isn't 0.32 for your error. It's 0.032 for your error. So there you go. For those of you saying, hey, hold on, you made a mistake. You were right. Fixed it. Don't worry. All right. Let's move on to our next practice problem. I measure my height to be 192 centimeters. My actual height is 196 centimeters. What is my percent error? So again, I'm going to take 196, and I'm going to subtract 192, and I'm going to get an error of 4 centimeters. So that was my first step. My second step is I need to find what my decimal error is. So what am I going to do? What number am I going to divide by? Am I going to divide by 192 or 196? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide by 196 because that's my actual height. That's what the correct answer should be. So I'm going to take 4 and I'm going to divide it by 196. And I should find that my decimal error is 0.02. All right, and this time I actually wrote it correct. And step number 3. All right, so now I need to take that decimal and I need to convert it into a percentage. So I'm going to take 0.02 and I'm going to multiply by 100. And I should get an error of 2%. That should be my error, which means I was 2% off in my answer. Also, for those of you wondering, with your decimal, yeah, there were a whole bunch of other digits that were there. I just rounded it to that place there, to that second decimal place. Frequently, that's all you're going to need. If there's something more than that or something very specific that I would like from you, I will tell you in the directions. It should have this number of decimal places. That way we make sure you're finding that correct answer. If you have questions about percent error, make sure you let me know either within our class or through messaging me in our Google Classroom. Thank you for watching this video. If you have questions again, let me know. Have a good one.